Hi everyone, welcome to a special up late episode of Devs in the Shed. So with me, I'm Matthew Coles, and we've got Aaron here, and we have Paul.
Hi all.
For those that might not be familiar with our show, we're usually live 12 p.m. lunchtimes AEST time on the AWS Twitch channel. So come join us if you really like our show. We'd love to have you come. Devs in the Shed though, how do we come up with the name, Aaron, maybe? Maybe that's a good starter for everyone.
So at AWS, we're all builders. We all like to do software engineering, but we also like to get into our IoT devices. We like to work with tools. And so we all have sheds. So we actually get out into our sheds and we build real world devices, projects, and we bring them on the show and we discuss them, and we have other people who like to come in and demonstrate their projects that they're working on and come and talk to us about what they're building as well. So we're devs, we're in sheds, and so we're devs in the shed.
Yep, and we usually have different partners, different people from AWS. They come and join occasionally too. So we usually have quite a diverse group of people that both watch our show across Australia and New Zealand, of course, but globally too. And then we also have them come and present really cool things that they're building on the AWS platform. So I guess because it is a Summit special, I wanted to ask both of you what your favourite things were so far in Summit. The first thing, my favourite thing, has been the Amplify talk that Derek Bingham gave, where he actually showed how designers can load in things with Figma into Amplify Studio, and then developers can take that and build web applications using it and have the designs from the web designers easily accessible. Maybe Paul, do you want to tell us about your favourite session?
Well, I think there's two favourite things that I'd find from Summit this year. Oh, maybe three actually. The first one probably is being back in people, back in person. With my colleagues and having the devs in the shed together. That's a great thing. But reconnecting back with my customers, I've got a lot of my customers here. That's been really fun. But probably the first of the two favourite things was I think the Customer 360 retail booth was pretty amazing. And maybe I'm a little bit biased on that because I was supporting and I set up a lot of that there.
Yeah.
But it was really great to see what the retailers are looking to take advantage of within AWS Cloud and some of our solutions. And the demos were really fun setting that up. So Tuesday I was here all day, and we're devs. We're still getting our hands on. We're still trying to prepare these demos. A lot of compilation, messing around with makefiles, trying to get to work last minute. We pulled it all together and we got it working really well. As for my favourite session, look, I'm sure everybody in the audience can hear a reasonable amount of background noise. So this is our event here, and the community is here, and people are getting together. But the most of what you're hearing is the Deep Racer. So there's a lot of action, a lot of noise going on in the Deep Racer events. So probably one of those sessions was by Aileen Liu. So her session is kickstarting your ML journey with AWS and getting hands-on with Deep Racer. So we've talked about that a couple of times on the stream, and at some point we will go ahead and we'll do that. But so many of my customers and members of the community and people I'm talking to about what is going on, where are devs pushing their limits, and it is a lot of it is about how do we augment and bring in machine learning, big data science into our organisation, and what does that actually mean to us, and how do we take our current developers that are used to writing code, used to writing React, Python, maybe some JavaScript, whatever that might be, CRUD-based applications, but what do we do when it comes to machine learning, and how do we introduce that? And AWS has done a great job of gamifying that whole scenario all the way through, introducing to the topics. It's light touch, so beginners can get in there. You can get into pretty quickly and just start messing with some of the hyperparameters or dig deeper into the code moving through. So I think that was one of my favourite sessions, and there was quite a lot of people who were talking about that one as well. What about you, Aaron?
So I think for me, I had two favourites. One was probably the guest speaker, Swoop Arrow, in the day 2 keynote this morning. Just having a look at what they've done in terms of using AI/ML, also as using IoT to develop their drone swarm. Essentially, they've got nine areas or regions around the world where they're actually deploying their drones to airlift and drop medical supplies. And it's all controlled out of Melbourne. So they have their control center in Melbourne. Everything runs through AWS. They can deploy out to their drones, their firmware updates. Everything's tracked in terms of a digital twin. They have a shadow of every single drone from their field in AWS, and they're tracking every single part in those drones. To me, that was just phenomenal. The amount of detail, the amount of integration that they have with their own devices with AWS.
Yep.
So that to me was probably my favorite in terms of one of our guest speakers to come into the summit. My other favorite one is a little bit more close to home. Arden Pakir, one of our principal solutions architect, gave a talk on creating flexible APIs to unlock organizational agility. For me, this one's a bit of a favorite just because I'm a big fan of integration. I'm a big fan of architectural patterns and microservices. And so his talk discussing API Gateway for REST and AppSync for GraphQL and the microservice patterns, that one was a big favorite for me. So developing like applications and microservice patterns using API Gateway, AppSync for integration, that was probably my favorite for the homegrown sessions.
Yep. Excellent. So one of the things is, because we are absolutely live right now, we are available on the Twitch chat.
Yep.
So if you are watching our stream, let us know what your favorite session is. How's the chat going so far? Is anything worth calling out?
So far, we're just having questions around what's our sheds made of. So my shed is a big tin shed, I guess.
Yep.
Look, I mean, at the moment, I've got a proper tin shed, and you know, for any of the regulars to know that like I've moved recently and we're setting that up, but actually I will be starting to stream out of the log cabin in my backyard. So I have an old miner's log cabin in the backyard, so hopefully that'll bring a bit more change to just having a tin shed in the backyard.
Excellent. And mine is a wood cabin. So you'll usually see me there. I built it about 2 years ago. I've got Ethernet, I've got my air conditioning, I've got everything to kind of survive. What about you? How's your shed?
So as I said, like mine is a tin shed, but it's fully insulated. It was developed as the person who built the shed before I bought the house was an electrician.
Yep.
That was his workshop, so I've turned it into my machine shop. That's where I work on my motorbikes. If you've seen the show, I've got my few motorbikes in the background, and that's where I get into the mechanics and a bit more of the mechatronic types of projects that I work on.
Yeah, awesome. So one of the things is we are actually going to have an episode in a couple of weeks, just letting everyone know in advance, where we've got one of the people from AWS coming on. They've built a full-size prey mantis. So that's going to be a really interesting episode. I don't know actually if we're going to have room in one of our sheds. We're going to have to work out where we're going to have to put it, but it's all robotic.
Out in the open or something.
It's going to be pretty awesome.
I can move my motorbikes out for the show.
Yep. So anyways, why are we here? Let's get straight into it, I guess. Summit's exciting for us, and I always like to play with things that have emojis. You might have watched some of the rock, paper, scissors stuff that we had. But what I want to do is I want to share my screen now, and I want to show you what we've built for AWS Summit. Now, being a New Zealander myself, I sometimes get my pronunciation stuffed up when it comes to what the Australians think this word should be. How would you describe this? What's the word? How would you say this? I would say Excite-mometer.
For me, it would be an Excite-mometer.
Excite-mometer, okay.
Well, I definitely would have read it as Excite-mometer, but Excite-mometer is probably also another good one as well. So.
Okay, cool. So what we'll do is we'll put a link in the chat, and you can use this web application yourself. We are using React, AWS Amplify, and we're using Amazon Location Service underneath Amplify Geo for the maps. So this is actually all built with effectively things within the Amplify suite, which is awesome to see. And as I mentioned beforehand, my favorite session was the Amplify one earlier from the week, so you can see I'm a little bit biased. But the idea is if you open up this website, you'll be able to click on where you are from the world. So if I zoom out, you know, Australia, New Zealand Summit, but this is the whole world that watched the stream. So if you are from any of the other countries, we haven't left you out. We're all about inclusion here. So please select where you're from by continent or by, I would say, region in Australia, or tell us if you're from New Zealand. If you click on one of these things, you'll see an emoji board. And the idea behind the emoji board is you can share how you feel about Summit with us. So I myself, from Melbourne, I would probably press coffee. We've had so much fun that I've actually started to wear myself out and I need to have a coffee.
Yep.
I know that some of us are probably going to have pizza tonight. So Derek, I'm looking at you from Western Australia.
I mean,
so
pizza, that's synonymous,
That's right. So have a look through the emojis. So click on where you are from, click your emoji, and what we'll do is we'll run through how we've built this effectively. We've created some real-time dashboards in the back end as well using QuickSight. So we'll kind of run through the solution today. And whilst you're on the chat, feel free to ask questions, go through things that are of interest that we show. We're more than happy to talk you through how all of this works behind the scenes. Firstly, I have some React code, so I've just put that up on the screen now. The React code could be written a little bit cleaner. Don't judge the code quality. I will open source it for people that want to take a look.
I think this is probably pretty clean React code for a Python developer, so I think you're doing all right.
Yeah, here we go. Let us know which programming language you like as well the best as we go through this. I develop with JavaScript. I love JavaScript, but ultimately I think my heart's at Python. Paul, what about you?
Look, I've programmed and worked with so many different languages. If I had to pick a favorite, I can only pick a favorite as a point in time. At this point in time, it would probably be Python.
Yeah,
Python, yep.
It makes sense, but for me, it's always the right tool for the right job. So, I mean, yes, I use Python a lot, but I think I'll always remain a favorite with C# and Java at the middle layer. That's kind of where I grew up, and that's kind of where I stay. So.
Yep. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly walk everyone through a little bit around the app. We won't go too much into the code, but as you can see from the imports, we are using the map libre GL library for mapping. We are using the Amplify UI React components to basically render that map as well. We have all this GraphQL stuff, so queries, mutations, subscriptions, that's all in a subfolder of this project. And this is all the AWS AppSync.
That's using AppSync.
To DynamoDB backend. That's storing all the data. So what you've clicked, what you've put through is all effectively feeding through AppSync all the way into DynamoDB. We will open source the code. It's a little bit messy. I could have cleaned this up. Don't judge my code.
So I see you using the Amplify SDKs, but what else in Amplify are you using to deploy this out?
Yeah, so actually that probably brings me, so we'll jump out of the code and we'll go back into my web browser. So hopefully everyone can see it there. The URL, summit.awsanz.com, this is actually all fully hosted through Amplify. So I'm actually using Amplify to do the hosting. It's created a CI/CD pipeline. It's deployed the application into S3 and CloudFront. It's generated SSL certificates. I've picked a domain as well that I have set up in Route 53. All of that sounds complex, but it's literally like 2 button clicks with an Amplify.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll jump to the AWS console. We'll go to the AWS Amplify service, and we will choose Summit 22. So I'll have a look at the Summit app that I've made. So firstly, I actually don't need to use any of the Amplify libraries if I wanted to. I might just be looking for web hosting right now. I might be like, I want to see my app up and running. I want a domain very quickly. I want some form of hosting.
And even further on that, like you want to build and host your application, but you want a pipeline, you want some stage, you want some environments, and you want a mechanism to deploy a test version of your environment and easily password protect that. So that's another
and even on top of that, again, you don't actually have to use AWS code commit. Like if you're used to using GitHub, you can use your GitHub and link it in and trigger your CI from there.
Yep. So I've got my CI/CD pipeline. I'll try and walk through in some way that's easy to understand. Let us know in the chat if there's things that you want to dive into. So I know the chat usually picks up halfway through this, but you can see I'm provisioning the app, I'm doing a build, I'm doing some tests within that build, I'm doing the deploy and the verify. All of this is constructed in the background without me needing to know about it, but if something does go wrong, it's using all AWS services under the hood, so I can very easily see, hey, code build actually failed, I need something in my code build YAML file. Or hey, something happened on S3, I might need to configure some IAM permissions, whatever it is. I actually have control as a developer to see the logs and see what's happening underneath. I can even see, and it's usually my fault, it's usually something to do with a particular library in NPM that I'm using.
Not a syntax error?
It's been upgraded.
Syntax error or an extra space in one of the YAML files.
Yep. So all of that's through the CI/CD pipeline. It basically does the deploy. That deploy is happening on S3 and CloudFront. And then it just does a verification before it actually pushes up and updates the site that you already have. This can be a lot more complicated as a developer, though. So usually I'm operating within a dev environment. I might have particular branches that, Aaron, maybe you're working on, let's say. Paul, do you want to do the UAT branch? You might be doing UAT testing, making sure that everything looks good. And then we might also have a production branch as well. So all of these CI/CD pipelines are built out dynamically, which is pretty awesome.
So in Amplify, that's the stages, right? So we can link a branch to an Amplify stage, and that allows us to deploy to our different environments for the UAT, the dev, and the production.
Yep. And the other cool thing is, I could be using code commit to store all my codes, but as a developer, I'm quite a big fan of GitHub sometimes.
Yep.
So you can see my source repository was through GitHub. When I do a git push, so I'll do a git commit, and a git push. That code will automatically feed through this pipeline. It will automatically build the app. If things go wrong, it won't roll out that version. But if it's all good, it's all hunky-dory, we get that beautiful website that you saw beforehand.
And maybe one more thing before we go on to next is, like, I mean, you just jumped ahead of me there with Matt.
Yeah, I know. I'm ahead of you.
And when we go to the screen, we'll talk you through that. But configuring your domain, your SSL certificate, renewing the SSL certificate, setting up the correct CNAMEs, and messing with DNS, there are still a lot of developers that have not spent a lot of time doing that, and it can become complicated. Like, how long do you wait? What do you create for those specific records to verify ownership of that domain so that you can create those CNAMEs? What do you do with certificates? How do you renew them? What do you do? How do you apply them? How do you apply the correct policies to your CloudFront distribution? Where do you create the certificate to apply to CloudFront distribution? There's a few steps involved there. Now, if you've got something that's highly customized and you've been working this for a while, like it's okay. You get quite used to it. We've taken through one of the earliest CDK projects that we did, where we migrated from CDK 1 to 2. We did all of that in CDK, and it was like reasonable minimal amount of code. But you would see that within your console. With Amplify, that is taken care of you, and you can configure all of that through through the GUI interface. But it's also abstracted out of your account. So you're not looking into your account and seeing some services that are being spun up in an abstract manner. That is hosted for you, like within AWS, within your account, but not within your account where you can visibly see that's abstracted away. So maybe if we go back to the...
Yeah, let's go back to the application. So I'll bring up my screen again. Now, within the domain management view of Amplify, I can simply add a domain. So I might have brought a domain through Route 53. I might be borrowing domains from one of my AWS accounts or one of the other sites that I purchased domains from. I would simply choose that domain. So it could be, let's go devsintheshed.com. I'd be able to then configure the domain. I could have it as a sub domain if I wanted to, but I can actually set up the SSL certificate and everything through this view really, really easily. So it's nice, easy to do, easy to use. And I know a lot of people that are building on AWS actively today that will be in the chat. Let us know what you're building. I know a lot of you would be familiar with configuring all these things in Route 53. So you might have multiple aspects that you're configuring. Then you might go into Certificate Manager, generate that certificate. One click is awesome.
I might just take a moment to answer one of the questions that's come through Twitch. We've got Derek asking about, what is AppSync? Tell me more. So if you're used to working with APIs, API gateway is very common with REST. Yeah. So we can do our post, our get, and we can do REST with our post, get verbs and everything to query and post data on RESTful resources. Yep. With AppSync, what it is, it's actually an AWS managed service for a GraphQL API. So it's actually using GraphQL as the protocol to actually do a post to actually query, like if it's a query or it's a mutation. So if you're wanting to get query data or make a change to your data source under the hood, you're actually still doing a post, and you're actually posting to say, this is the GraphQL format, but these are the properties that I want to be filled. And GraphQL under the hood has resolvers that can actually aggregate multiple data sources to fulfill that domain model that's then handed back to the request. So as Matt said before, he's using GraphQL here through AppSync, through Amplify. That's actually simplified through the Amplify libraries, through the Amplify CLI, just a Amplify add API and selecting GraphQL. You don't need to be intimate with GraphQL to actually use GraphQL. It's all set up for you. It's backed by DynamoDB. The resolvers are there for you, and you just basically say, these are the data properties that I want. This is the model that I want, and deploy it through Amplify.
Yep.
I think we've gone through a whole lot of theory. We've got a couple of people. Some people want to see a little more code, and they want to see the action. Like, what happens when I click that? When I press that button, right? If there's a button, you're going to want to press it. And I think some of our audience members have been pressing some of those buttons. So take us through what happens when you press the button, Matt.
Yeah, so shall we actually go to the dashboard first?
Yeah, maybe let's go to the dashboard. Yeah, so we're going to start the other way. Not at the code, not at the application, but at the results that come out of the back of that.
Yep, so if we get my screen back up and running, like what we'll be able to see is the quick site view. So hopefully that's up for everyone. Yep, I can see this. So what I've done is everything that you are entering in within the maps view. So if I click on New Zealand and I send in a couple of laptops, all of that is being pushed through Dynamo. I'll show you the schema. I'll go into detail later, but let's have a look at what the dashboard looks like, because I know some people have been playing with the app. So as this is all in QuickSight, I could have the data refreshed on a consistent basis. But what I am going to do is I'm actually going to go into QuickSight. I'm going to refresh the data right now. And what I'll be able to see is all my entries that you've published into DynamoDB from the audience, which is awesome. I'll be able to see that within this very quick dashboard that I configured. So if I bring the dashboard up, here it is for everyone. So we can see these are all the emojis that you've pressed. So it looks like the most popular emoji is the big smiley face.
Everyone's happy.
Everyone's happy, so that's awesome. So everyone's enjoying AWS Summit. It is very noisy here, very hectic. So in the background, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but Deep Racer is going on, and so you can hear the energy, and I'm definitely going to be
excitement, definitely.
Yeah, give us about 15 minutes, and I'll be over there seeing who's winning the Deep Racer contest. But the second most popular one, and it looks like the audience is
hungry.
Relatable to me.
Yeah,
I love
it's
pizza.
up late. We're hungry.
Yep. So as we can see, the pizza emoji is the second most popular. Shout out to everyone from Victoria. You are acing it. So we've got like 60 people that have entered data from Victoria. I can see some of my old test data is there. So don't count that 12. The 60 is real. The 12 is from my testing earlier today to make sure this goes smoothly. So Victoria, awesome job. It looks like we have quite a few people from NSW in there as well. Call out to all the folks in New Zealand. I'll be over there hopefully visiting soon, and I'm a New Zealander, as I mentioned beforehand. I can't wait to get back home. Don't judge me, I've half lost my accent. And then out of the rest of the world, it looks like we've got some people that have come in through Asia, some people have come from Africa. I know that we usually have a lot of people from the US that watch the show, but we are about 5 hours later than when we normally stream. So I'm suspecting that you guys have been good and you've gone to bed nice and early. So let us know in the chat if you're still up in America and watching us. I'd love to hear. And hopefully you've got a nice drink of Coke or something like that in front of you so you can enjoy and wrap up your night afterwards, after the session. So looking at the count of records by location and emoji, I can actually see that Victoria has picked a large smiley face as the most popular one. And it does actually look like we've got, I think, Northern Territory and other Victoria and New South Wales as the other ones that have picked that particular entry. We've got a few people picking coffee. And what we're going to do is if we repost that link for people that came in late into the chat, we'll go back at the very end and we'll have a look at the dashboard and see if the data's changed and see which country or which area of Australia ultimately has the most emojis coming through.
Yep.
I haven't defined this to be one-to-one, so if you are wanting to effectively enter multiple emojis, feel free to.
Go for it.
Winning state, winning country, let's get some competition happening. Anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my code. And one thing is I wanted to talk about the app sync piece, right? And I might actually show some Amplify related stuff first. So if I do an Amplify status command within my terminal, let's give it 2 seconds to catch up. You can see all the resources that I actually use. So I actually used authentication through Cognito. That was actually all generated in the back end. I just did an Amplify add API command. I chose GraphQL and I entered in a schema that I'll show in a second. And that authentication was just one question, and it configured Cognito in the end for me. I configured non-authenticated users for Cognito as well, so people could come in and they could actually send stuff into DynamoDB from the website that weren't actually going through a login window. They weren't actually going through like Cognito itself. Essentially, we'll get the words right on that. And then I've also just added an Amplify Geo, which is Amplify Add Geo. I know you're an expert on Geo, though.
That's backed by our Amazon Location Service.
Yep.
So there's many features that Amazon Location Service provides.
Yep.
But Amplify has created some SDKs to talk directly with the Amazon Location Service to help provide maps and tracking, and so it's an easy add to the toolchain to get maps quickly into your application.
Yep. How's the chat coming along? Have we got some competition?
I think we've got a bit of competition around food and drink at the moment.
Nice. That's probably because we've got Melbourne on, I reckon.
Yeah, well, I mean, like Derek's called out, like, no drink there. Well, look, there's a lot of people here and there's a lot of people having a couple of drinks, but I think when we think about drinks, given that we're from Melbourne, it's probably coffee, and
Always coffee.
we've been at it all day, so we probably just thought coffee was a drink.
Yep.
So, Matt, what was probably interesting to some of the people in the audience is, use DynamoDB, we tend to think of a data store that is like look up by key value, something that we're not typically reporting dashboarding on, or building some sort of reporting engine off the back of DynamoDB. It's typically gone into some other service to do something like that. Maybe talk us through what you have done to take that data from Dynamo and get it to display in a database, in a dashboard. Something that we would see is pretty easy if we write SQL queries, but obviously when we're dealing with Dynamo, that's a different ballgame.
Yeah, that is true. So I'll bring up my screen again. So let's wait for it. Hopefully it loads now. My screen should be coming up. There we go. So that Amplify Ad API, right? That got me going. It says, do you want to generate a GraphQL schema? I go, yes. It goes, do you want to do that right now? I go, yes, all within the Amplify CLI. And then it will generate the schema file. And so in the schema file, I'll give the table a name, essentially, my model a name, depending on which world you come from. I can give the record a unique identifier, which I have done. I'll give it a location as well, and then I give it a particular emoji. If I wanted to create extra fields, I could add them in. I could create multiple models if I wanted to, if I've got... Yeah, you want to talk about it?
Well, just a call out as well. So for those who are slightly familiar with GraphQL, and maybe not specifically to AppSync, the difference here, you can create different types, but anything that's attributed with the at model is the ones that are going to be backed by the DynamoDB table.
Yep. So the beauty of all of this is, as a developer, I've literally done 4, 5, if you include the braces.
It's an object. You could probably put it all on one line, so it'd be a line of code.
A line of code. Let's go with a line of code. So from that line of code, when I actually do an Amplify push command, it's going to build all the resources in the cloud. So the Amplify effectively creates a backend folder. So Amplify backend, that's going to have the configuration of what it needs to build in the cloud. It's going to use CloudFormation under the scenes to do all of this. So it's all cloud native. It's generating cloud native resources, which I love as well. That's why I really like the Amplify framework. And then once it's done the deployment, it usually creates a current cloud backend folder, which actually has the exacts, right? So I've asked for authentication, and it's got to come back with a Cognito identifier for me. I've wanted GraphQL, I wanted to use AppSync, so there's going to be an AppSync endpoint that's come back to me. So all of that's going to be in the current configs folder, and it's also going to be in an exports file that Amplify will put up there. So what I will do now is I'll jump to the console view, and let's kind of track all of this back from the app. So going into the Amplify console, if I go to the back-end environment, this is where all the CLI resources have been created. So I can see API there. That's going to be an API gateway if I had used that, but in my case, I use AppSync. I would click into that. You can see it's a GraphQL API. It's created this emoji feedback table for me. If I go to view in AppSync, as a developer, it's really cool as well. You're learning AWS, but you can start to build things on the cloud. You don't necessarily need to know the screen, what's actually happening behind the scenes, but Amplify will lead you there as well. So you'll suddenly, as you're learning about the cloud, as you're building your web application or mobile application, you'll start to get more and more comfortable with what's happening behind the scenes. You'll be able to alter things further. You'll be able to understand the services that are used underneath.
That's a great call out, actually. I've seen a lot of customers take Amplify to start as their prototype, start building out an application, but then actually as they get more familiar with the services in the back end, they start to extend it by going in, extending it with Lambdas, maybe not through Amplify, or actually connecting the Lambdas that they did create through Amplify, and then actually connect them with the AWS SDK and connect with other services that maybe aren't at the moment in Amplify, to then connect a massive big microservice ecosystem and build their what started as a small Amplify app into a much larger system.
It can be a gentle introduction, right? You can go through Amplify and then just break out into the rest of the services that are actually stitched together to produce your application.
Yep. So let's go back into AppSync. Let's have a look at what it looks like in the console itself. So I've got my Summit 22 dev table. And within that, I have a schema. So this is kind of what I created in Amplify. It's been pushed up, but it's actually generated a bunch of additional information behind the scenes, so I actually don't need to be an expert in understanding AppSync schemas. but I can actually look at what it's produced. I can export it as well and use it elsewhere too. Actually, I want to rewind for a second, right? We were talking about like going into the wider ecosystem of AWS. So one of the really cool things about Amplify at the moment now, as of last year, is that you can actually import and export from CDK. So that basically means that you can have the infrastructure that's generated from Amplify be the infrastructure that's used for other applications that you're building behind the scenes or AWS native resources. You could do the very advanced things if your use cases evolve over time. And the other thing is, if you've got your AWS infrastructure already, but you need to build a web application or a mobile application to serve end users on top of your IT services and your dashboards and other applications that you've got in your company, you can effectively import those resources into Amplify really, really quickly without needing to use the CLI too. Going back to my screen, if I go into, one interesting thing is so we've got the schema on the left-hand side. The resolvers are really fascinating as well because this is actually using VTL behind the scenes, and this is what's allowing AppSync to tie into Dynamo. And what I might say as well is, if I go into data sources, we could actually swap this to RDS and the like. So I know you've done some work on this, Aaron.
Yep, so I'm actually working on something at the moment, so we will be releasing a blog and some CDK for it, but it is possible to generate, if you've got an RDS instance already, so you've got a relational database, we can generate a GraphQL model off of that relational database. So this is really important for people who already have relational database structures and who want to start to take advantage of AppSync and GraphQL. So yeah, absolutely. You can plug in multiple data sources for an entire schema or a model, or you can even use a data source per property on a model.
Yep, very nice. So going back to my screen, what we'll do is we will jump into that data source, right? So let's have a look at what's sitting in Dynamo itself. So kind of peeling the onion again. We are now in the DynamoDB service. This is all behind the scenes behind AppSync. We could go to it directly. I have my, I'm going to do that in a second actually. I've got my emoji feedback table. I can go and explore those table items. And so I can actually have a look at all the data that's been generated. And I can see we've got like 300 items returned. So it looks like a lot of people are enjoying the application. Anything on the chat, by the way? Anything to call out?
Just some commentary around using VTL. And I think that the answer to that is VTL is a standard that has been implemented to, when you're doing simplistic mappings between what you're doing. So it is a really good bootstrap. But using GraphQL and AppSync doesn't mean that you are restricted to using VTL. You can set that up however you need to do.
You can use getting Lambda going, if you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. You can get that going pretty fast. So, Matt, tell us when you hit refresh, what is that doing?
Yeah, so if we go back to my screen, I've just refreshed the data in QuickSight. Now, I know we're a little bit short on time, but what's happened behind the scenes from Dynamo is I have, and I'll run through this very, very quickly. If I go into my tables, go into my emoji table, what I have done is I have exported the data into effectively Athena behind the scenes, and I've exported that into Lambda, and then I've pulled that into QuickSight, and I refresh the view. So if we have a quick look at that view, and I know we've got to cut very quickly, so give us a few seconds. Here we go.
Yes, we're racing.
I can see that all the emojis and everything are up to date. And
okay. Look at that. We've had
a huge increase. So everyone's used
So either we've had a huge amount of viewers, or a lot of people clicking a lot of buttons.
Yep. So I hope everyone has loved the walkthrough. I hope you have enjoyed exploring what we've built here today. With AWS Amplify. If you've enjoyed the show, feel free to join us every Wednesday, 12 p.m. AEST time. We'll be streaming on AWS Twitch channel. We would love to have you along, love to have you as an audience. I have seen Paul, I saw you sneaking socks into your bag. Very quickly, do you want to tell everyone about that?
Well, yes, everybody comes to the events, especially AWS, they love to collect some swag. So if you're anywhere around us or you see us tonight at this site, come up to us and talk to us. We can get you some AWS socks. But back to our comment here from Nelking, racing. And I think we were racing to get the time, but you're also hearing the background, and that's elevated noise, which means that deep race is coming up. Now, I've spent a fair bit of time around that track. A lot of left turns, a lot of straights there. I think that's going to be really, really exciting. Matt?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm going to jump in a second. But in terms of tonight's sessions, we're going to have we're big fans of actually Internet of Things firstly, right? So we're big fans of that. We love building things like things with Raspberry Pi on our show. We built an interactive Christmas tree back in December. May and Maya are actually going to show you something that they've built with a Raspberry Pi, all connected into AWS. But in the next couple of seconds, we're actually going to go to the Deep Racer finals.